Well, I'm your host, Liam Leonard, and today I'm joined by Ben Walker. He has a company that's one of the leaders in transcription services throughout the United States, and lucky to have him on the call today. Ben, do you want to take a moment and just introduce yourself and your company to the listeners?
Sure, great. Thanks, Liam, and thanks for having me. We're transcription outsourcing in Denver, Colorado, and like you mentioned, we have clients all over the country. We're more of premium transcription services with US-based people, mostly college educated, and we work with government agencies, a lot of law firms, courthouses, more of a full service, and like I said, premium transcription service. We're not a cheap company by any means. We're a little bit, or sometimes 50% more expensive than like the giant companies that use overseas people.
But it sounds like your clientele is also the ones that need that expertise in terms of delivering accurate and relevant to their function or industry that they're in, and seems to fit that.
Yeah, exactly. They know what they're paying for and what they're getting because they've tried the cheaper services and they know that it's not going to come back 99% accurate like ours will, with the proper punctuation, the proper spelling, grammar. Yeah, you're exactly right.
That makes a lot of sense. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of the evolution of your business, kind of where you're at today and kind of where you started?
Yeah, we started as a medical transcription company a little over 10 years ago. And about the same time, 10 years ago, there started to be major changes happening in the medical industry and the healthcare as a whole, where doctors were starting to digitize everything. So now doctors point and click a lot of their reports that they used to dictate to us, and we would type it. So about the same time, noticing that these surgery centers and doctors' offices of different kinds and hospitals started to go away from transcription, I got a little nervous. I don't have a resume and I don't like working for other people. So we were getting phone calls randomly from law firms and law enforcement agencies asking us to transcribe interviews or court hearings. And we would tell them, no, we didn't have the right people to do that. Well, one of the days I was slower and didn't have as much work to do, I started to do research and found out that there was a whole new world of legal transcription and law enforcement transcription I wasn't aware of. So then I started looking into how do we get people that can transcribe this for us, because the medical transcriptionists don't know how to do legal or law enforcement. I found people on LinkedIn, I found people on other websites and job boards. Then we started saying yes to those calls. We built out websites to attract people through search engine optimization. Then we started replying to RFPs in different parts of the country for law enforcement transcription. We were successful and got some awards, and it kind of took off from there on its own. I mean, we kind of did it on purpose, but it also took off on its own.
So it sounds like you almost had two waves. You kind of had the initial wave, which was focused on medical transcription, experienced some success there, kind of had a pivot in the industry, and then pivoted your business to kind of find kind of a new client base in the government and legal side of things.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Medical transcription was fun for me because I liked going to medical conferences and I liked meeting, CFOs and CEOs of different medical practices and surgery centers and hospitals. They're educated, they dress well, they speak well, they aren't necessarily beating you up on price because, again, they realize that, if you want a good service, you have to pay for it. And we weren't the most expensive, but we weren't the cheapest. And it was easy. Like I'd go to a medical conference in Denver, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, and we'd get 2 new clients every time. Like without fail, 2 or 3 new clients. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. Pay $600, pay $1,000, have a booth, get new clients. It was easy. That started to change. So yeah, it it forced us to find a new way to make money.
Nice. And it sounds like you've been successful in doing that and continuing to build that side of the business, obviously, which kind of leads into our core question here on the prosperity perspective, which is kind of understanding as you've started to make that income and that profitability, and you've got this, excess cash flow now. What are you doing with that excess cash flow? Where are you investing? How do you think of that strategically?
Uh, I ask friends who are in the same situation or who've been there in the past. So sometimes they're a little bit older, sometimes they're my age, sometimes they're a little bit younger. This depends. If I respect them and get along with them, I'll ask their advice. Um, I personally, like you and I talked about before, I've been reinvesting in the company a lot. And I've also done an Airbnb that I have actually in my house here in Denver. It has a separate entrance. A friend of mine had an Airbnb. I then looked into it some more. I paid a contractor to remodel my basement, do some upgrades, put it on Airbnb and a couple other sites like that. And I've had that for a little over 3 years. So that's providing passive income and paying my mortgage. Um, I'm looking into more of that and more rental situations with premium rentals in other cities with some guys that I know through a CEO peer group I'm in. Um, Also looking at some small businesses to buy, the boring ones like a dry cleaner, a liquor store in a small town, the things that people don't really think about, but they can still make you 7, 8, 9% a year without you doing anything. You leave everything in place, you become the owner and let it run on its own. It's already successful. We're not reinventing the wheel here.
Nice. Kind of the search fund model in a small community.
Yes, exactly.
That's one of the big reasons that I left my big cushy corporate job was that exact realization that there are plenty of people who are very successful and actually more part of their community in owning these small businesses in these communities, right? Whether it's a small town, right, et cetera. And obviously you've got the real estate component of that you could play into as well. That creates wealth that I think is fascinating. Um, as you look back when you were starting up, is there anything that you would do differently in terms of where you put your money to set yourself up, or lessons from what you've learned now that you would apply from back then?
Yes, without a doubt, I would have gotten a coach or a mentor sooner. Someone who'd been there, done that you can bounce ideas off of and get the right answers for situations that you're not familiar with. You think you know the answer or the right answer, but you're not even close. And it's a tough realization to come to realize that, yeah, like that's how you should probably do it, or that's how conventional wisdom says to do it, or your friends say to do it. That's not necessarily the right way to do it, though. And that can be any number of things, like the right accounting system, the right PR firm, the right marketing company, an employee situation, where you need to let someone go or someone has missed work without telling you. There's all kinds of weird situations that come up that you think you know the answer to, that you don't know the answer to. So getting a coach or a mentor is a must.
So when you talk about a coach or a mentor, a couple different things that come to mind for me, right? Obviously, you've got kind of the life coach that's kind of helping with a lot of personal matters. You've got a business coach. You've got a financial mentor. Kind of, is there one that you would say that you narrowed in on? Is it one person that's providing all three? Are they different people? Kind of, how did that work for you? And what do you recommend today?
I was lucky enough to find a gentleman who covered all three. He was, or is, I should say, he is not my coach now, but he is in his early 70s, and he'd been there, done that. He's married with kids. He was a CFO of a Fortune 500 company. He ran his own business also at, I don't want to say at the same time, but he kind of started it with his wife. And then once he retired from the massive corporation, he and his wife run that on their own. And he led a group through Vistage. That's how I met him. I'd done some research on different groups like that provided coaching as well. And I ended up with Vistage. And we became much more close than you would normally think. Like, he's a personal friend of mine that I can still reach out to. I was in for 4.5 years or so, and it kind of ran its course. And I think I'll take a couple of years off and then I'll go back, maybe as a private client of his.
Very nice. From the financial perspective, what were one or two things that you did kind of early in the business that you would have changed, given the advice of this mentor that you had in place?
Oh, this is also difficult to admit. I leased too much office space and I hired too many employees, assuming we would grow into it, where you should lease as little office space as possible and need to grow out of it and hire as few people as possible until you absolutely have to hire someone else. Because you end up having too much office space and people sitting around doing nothing and hoping to get to that point. It's not good for anyone, because I would see people not working and I'd be like, oh, why aren't you working? But, well, there's nothing to do. And then I got all this office space and no one in it. I put the horse before the cart for sure in that situation, because we saw it coming in. We didn't know if it was going to come in or not, though, for sure. You know what I mean? And it was very frustrating. Plus, I was a new business owner and I would be pulling my hair out like, you need to be doing something. And, I was freaking out because, yeah.
So in that regard, I'm assuming that the employee base that you were hiring was all fixed overhead, salary-based types of people. And so you had this bigger and bigger nut that you had to cover every month, and trying to move the top line to match that bottom line. So if you were to rejigger, what are some of the signs in your mind that it's time to start looking to hire someone, right? Or to expand, right? Because you've got a fine line of, I want to support future growth, but at the same time, you want to make sure you've got some redundancies in place if someone's out, that you can cover from a bandwidth perspective and have the support that you need, that you're not driving people into the ground, and have a good culture, right? So what are some of those signs in your mind and what you've learned that signal to you that, hey, it's time to bring on a couple more people?
Well, having that experience of having too many employees, I then went backwards and looked at all our numbers and figured out it's about 110 to 115 hours of additional audio that we have come in a month. I need another person. So I figured out, like, scientifically, how many hours require another person to help with workflow and our independent contractor base. So that's how I went about it. But I also talked to our existing employees and I say, listen, we're pushing up to that 100 hours. Or 110. We're not going to hire someone till we know we have that every month. We may have to work 50 hours, 60 hours right now. They're on board with it because they know they're going to get bonuses and extra paid days off. And they're not totally freaking out that I need to have, every night at 5 o'clock, I have to log off, because they know some days are slow, some days are fast, and that we are going to reward them when we do hire new people, because we give them bonuses and extra paid, like I said, paid days off and raises based on metrics. It's all laid out for them to see, and they know it because we've hit some of those points and we've lived up to what we said.
That's great. Definitely an alignment for the organization, it sounds like, and keeping them all motivated and moving in the right direction with the understanding that more support comes, right? That they're not stranded or in this purgatory, so to speak, right? Of hard work for perpetuity, like some of us business owners have to be in, right? Longer term. We don't get that luxury of being relieved all the time.
Yeah, and they totally get that. And like you said, as the business owner, we may have to work more than them. And actually, I do. And I don't mind because I know what I signed up for. I'm also buying my freedom down the road so I don't have to work until I'm 80. And they also know that. We talk about hiring yourself out of a job. So the more people you hire underneath you, the less you have to do. And eventually, you'll be the expert where you're doing maybe 40 hours of work and the people under you are doing more of the smaller detailed work that you used to do. So we're hiring ourselves out of jobs. That doesn't mean I'm going to fire you. It means you're doing a good job. The company's growing, the clients are happy, so you will do less work in the end.
Yeah. And so as you're moving towards less work and this financial freedom down the line, two-part question, right? One is, what's the most exciting thing that you're working on today, right? And then the second is, what's the thing that gets you most excited from a investment standpoint as well?
The most exciting thing I'm working on today is hiring a new salesperson to do the government sales through a government cooperative agreement that we were awarded a couple of years ago called NASPO Value Point. The most exciting thing on the investment side is finding the next thing to invest in and going through the motions and work to figure out whether it's the right thing for me and for my comfort level. Because not everything is like crypto for me is not something I want to get into right now. I think it's too much of a gamble. I'm much more conservative though than most. So I've stayed away from that. And like I mentioned earlier, the premium luxury rentals is something I'm really looking into right now and still digging into to figure out if it's the right thing for me.
Do you have a set of criteria that you've developed in terms of what makes a good investment for you and what fits your investment outlook and risk tolerance?
Yes and no. I tend to lean more conservative. So I don't go for the big where somebody's like, you'll get 25% return annually. That's never worked for me in the past. So I stay away from that. The too good to be true thing, I kind of follow that. If they're talking more than like 10, 12%, I get suspicious immediately.
That makes sense. And I can definitely see where you're coming from that perspective. And that's ironically where we have staked our company. One of our mottos is consistent returns and transparent business. And we'll never deliver 20%. And we don't want you to think we'll deliver 20%, but we will deliver, 8 to 9 to 10% every single year in and out, right? And you know that you can count on it. You're not going to have a big swing and you're not going to have a big dip, right? And so it's a different risk tolerance, and it's more of a diversification play for a lot of the people that are, in crypto or something like that, where you take 8% versus they're trying to hit 100%, and it's a very different conversation. So, the government employee that you're looking to hire, is this new business venture that you're getting into, or is it an expansion of kind of some of the law enforcement space?
It's definitely an expansion of. So like I said, we were awarded this government cooperative agreement that allows us to go to all 50 states and territories, and government entities at the state level or below are allowed to piggyback onto this contract. So it's getting more government entities to piggyback onto this contract, letting them bypass the RFP process, which, if you're familiar with RFPs, it can be very time consuming and expensive for government agencies to do them. It adds more work to their plate that they don't necessarily plan for, but they need. So every government entity buys stuff from companies like mine every day. And if they have to do research about every single thing they buy, they won't have time to buy anything because they'll be doing research all the time. So this lets them bypass the research process because it's already been competitively bid. And this government entity cooperative agreement that I'm talking about, NASPO, did $17 billion in sales last year. So they're a legitimate entity that governments know about and trust. So we're hiring someone to expand that portion of our business that will come through that cooperative agreement.
Very cool. It's like you've got a pre-approval letter for thinking of my mortgage background that you get to walk into the local agencies and try to get them signed up to the national contract that you've got essentially, or regional or whatever that may be.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's very
because
cool.
they trust it. That's the same as your pre-approval letter. Yep.
Yeah. That's I could see why that's exciting. It sounds like there's some massive growth potential tied to that as well. If you can get the right people in and get the right businesses in. So definitely exciting. As we're wrapping up here, Ben, what's one or two pieces of advice that you'd want to leave with the audience, right? You've talked about some of the lessons you've learned through your mentors. What's that one piece of advice that you would give to someone who might be a little earlier in their journey as they're, looking to achieve success and get to the level that you're at today?
Oh, besides getting a mentor, I would say get as much public relations as possible. If people don't know about you, your product, or your service, they can't buy it. Get out there as much as possible so that you can start to get traction, because people aren't going to come to you. They're not just going to find you magically and say, oh, I want whatever it is you're selling. You have to get out there and put your face, your name, your brand out there so people can find out about you.
Did you go about that organically in terms of you building in your community, or did you use third parties or marketing agencies, PR firms to kind of help build that for you? And, at what point does that make sense to engage and spend the money to go and do those things?
I originally was doing it myself and then hired a PR company, and that's when it took off. When I hired a social marketing PR company to help with LinkedIn and Twitter, that's when it really started to take off and people started to take notice. Then it increased our web traffic and it increased traffic on LinkedIn. It all kind of then started to build on itself. But because we weren't doing that before, it had kind of stalled out.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, I appreciate you joining and kind of sharing some of your insights today, Ben. What's the best way for our listeners to be able to connect with you?
They can find us online at transcriptionoutsourcing.net. They can also call our offices between 8 and 5 Mountain Time at 720-287-3710. But our website's the best place to find most of our information, has our phone number, has a contact form. And someone will get back to you quickly. If not me, someone in my office will get back to you pretty quickly.
Awesome. Well, thanks for spending the time today, Ben, and look forward to staying connected.
Thanks for having me, Liam.